She stood in my living room drinking my wine wearing a diamond I paid for, and told me I didn't fit her aesthetic. She wanted me to be a silent ghost at her wedding. She didn't realize that ghosts tend to haunt the living. And this ghost was about to turn her fairy tale into a bankruptcy hearing. Hello, ladies. Grab your coffee and maybe pour a little something extra in it, because you are going to need it. We need to talk about weddings. You remember weddings, right? They used to be about two people promising to love each other, even when one of them gets bald and the other one gets cranky. They used to be about families coming together. But somewhere along the line, weddings stopped being about marriage and started being about content. They became photo shoots with a cake. And God help you if you are a mother-in-law who does not fit the color palette. I am Beatrice. For 30 years I planned corporate events for Fortune 500 companies. I have handled CEOs with God complexes and divas who demanded white peacocks at their launch parties. I thought nothing could shock me. I thought I had seen the bottom of the barrel of human vanity. But then my son Liam brought home Chloe. It was Thursday night. The wedding was 48 hours away. I was sitting in my living room, the same living room where Liam learned to walk, the same living room where I sat alone after my husband passed away and wondered how I would go on. Chloe and Liam were sitting on my beige sofa. Chloe was holding a glass of my best Chardonnay. She was not drinking it. She was just holding it because she thought it made her look sophisticated. She was 25 years old. She had perfect skin and perfect teeth, and a heart made of absolute zero liquid nitrogen. She was scrolling through her phone. Her thumb moved with the speed of a hummingbird. Beatrice, she said without looking up, we need to talk about the shot list. I smiled. I was good at smiling. It was a professional hazard. Of course, dear, I said. What is wrong? Did the photographer miss something? No, Chloe sighed. A long-suffering sigh that suggested I was being difficult by simply existing. It is about the aesthetic. You know our theme is ethereal champagne and cream. It is very specific, very curated. We are going for a timeless Vogue vibe. I nodded. I knew the theme. I knew the theme because I had written the checks for the theme. $80,000 worth of checks. I paid for the champagne linens. I paid for the cream roses imported from Ecuador. I paid for the venue, which was a refurbished barn. That cost more than my first house. It sounds lovely, I said. It is lovely, Chloe said, but we have a problem. She finally put down the phone and looked at me. Her eyes were like blue glass. The problem is the contrast, she said. Contrast? I asked. Yes, see, the bridal party is all in neutrals. Liam is in tan, I am obviously in white, and you… Well, you bought that navy blue dress. I touched the fabric of my skirt. I had spent weeks finding that dress. It was elegant, it was respectful, it was expensive. It is a mother of the groom dress, Chloe, I said. Navy is a classic color. It is too dark, Chloe said. It pulls the eye. When people look at the photos, there I will go straight to the dark spot. It ruins the composition, it destroys the vibe. I looked at Liam, my son, the boy I had raised to be kind, to be strong. He was studying the pattern on the rug like it was the most interesting thing in the world. Liam, I said, are you hearing this? Liam cleared his throat. Mom, he said softly, it is her big day. She just wants everything to be perfect. Maybe you could wear something lighter. It is 2 days before the wedding, Liam, I said. Where am I supposed to find a new gown that fits perfectly in 48 hours? Chloe waved her hand dismissively. Oh, we don't expect you to get a new dress, Beatrice. That would be stressful. We have a better solution, she smiled. It was the smile of a shark that just smelled blood in the water. We think it would be best if you just stepped out of the formal photos. The room went silent. The grandfather clock in the hall ticked. Tick, tock, tick, tock. I beg your pardon, I whispered. Just the main ones. Chloe said quickly, you know the ones that go on Instagram, the ones that go in the magazine submission. You can be in the candid shots, obviously, like in the background, but for the staged portraits at the altar, you just don't fit the look. You are a little mature for the brand I am building. Mature. She meant old. She meant I had wrinkles. She meant I didn't look like a 20-year-old model. I looked at my son again. Liam, I said, my voice was trembling. I am your mother. I am paying for this photographer. I am paying for the flowers behind you. I am paying for the roof over your head right now, because I gave you the down payment for your house. And you are telling me I am not good enough to be in a photograph with you. Liam looked up. His face was red. He looked miserable, but he was weak. He had always been weak when it came to pretty girls who told him what to do. Mom, please, he said, don't make a scene. It is just a photo. Why do you have to make everything about you? It is Chloe's vision. Just let her have this. Make everything about me. I felt something snap inside my chest. It was a small sound, like a dry twig breaking in winter. I had spent my entire life making things about other people. I planned their parties. I celebrated their successes. I mourned their losses. I had emptied my savings account to give these two children a fairy tale start to their life. I had signed the contract for the venue. I had signed the contract for the caterer. I had signed the contract for the house they were currently living in rent-free. And I was being told to step out of the frame because I was too dark, because I was too mature. I stood up. I walked over to the window and looked out at the night. I needed a moment. If I spoke now, I would scream, and screaming was not professional. Hello, ladies. Grab your coffee and maybe pour a little something extra in it, because you are going to need it. We need to talk about weddings. You remember weddings, right? They used to be about two people promising to love each other, even when one of them gets bald and the other one gets cranky. They used to be about families coming together. But somewhere along the line, weddings stopped being about marriage and started being about content. They became photo shoots with a cake. And God help you if you are a mother-in-law who does not fit the color palette. I am Beatrice. For 30 years I planned corporate events for Fortune 500 companies. I have handled CEOs with God complexes and divas who demanded white peacocks at their launch parties. I thought nothing could shock me. I thought I had seen the bottom of the barrel of human vanity. But then my son Liam brought home Chloe. It was Thursday night. The wedding was 48 hours away. I was sitting in my living room, the same living room where Liam learned to walk. The same living room where I sat alone after my husband passed away and wondered how I would go on. Chloe and Liam were sitting on my beige sofa. Chloe was holding a glass of my best Chardonnay. She was not drinking it. She was just holding it because she thought it made her look sophisticated. She was 25 years old. She had perfect skin and perfect teeth, and a heart made of absolute zero liquid nitrogen. She was scrolling through her phone. Her thumb moved with the speed of a hummingbird. Beatrice, she said without looking up, we need to talk about the shot list. I smiled. I was good at smiling. It was a professional hazard. Of course, dear, I said. What is wrong? Did the photographer miss something? No, Chloe sighed. A long-suffering sigh that suggested I was being difficult by simply existing. It is about the aesthetic. You know our theme is ethereal champagne and cream. It is very specific, very curated. We are going for a timeless Vogue vibe. I nodded. I knew the theme. I knew the theme because I had written the checks for the theme. $80,000 worth of checks. I paid for the champagne linens. I paid for the cream roses imported from Ecuador. I paid for the venue, which was a refurbished barn. That cost more than my first house. It sounds lovely, I said. It is lovely, Chloe said, but we have a problem. She finally put down the phone and looked at me. Her eyes were like blue glass. The problem is the contrast, she said. Contrast? I asked. Yes, see, the bridal party is all in neutrals. Liam is in tan, I am obviously in white, and you? Well, you bought that navy blue dress. I touched the fabric of my skirt. I had spent weeks finding that dress. It was elegant, it was respectful, it was expensive. It is the mother of the groom dress, Chloe, I said. Navy is a classic color. It is too dark, Chloe said. It pulls the eye. When people look at the photos, there I will go straight to the dark spot. It ruins the composition. It destroys the vibe. I looked at Liam, my son, the boy I had raised to be kind, to be strong. He was studying the pattern on the rug like it was the most interesting thing in the world. Liam, I said, are you hearing this? Liam cleared his throat. Mom, he said softly, it is her big day. She just wants everything to be perfect. Maybe you could wear something lighter. It is 2 days before the wedding, Liam, I said. Where am I supposed to find a new gown that fits perfectly in 48 hours? Chloe waved her hand dismissively. Oh, we don't expect you to get a new dress, Beatrice. That would be stressful. We have a better solution, she smiled. It was the smile of a shark that just smelled blood in the water. We think it would be best if you just stepped out of the formal photos. The room went silent. The grandfather clock in the hall ticked. Tick, tock, tick, tock. I beg your pardon, I whispered. Just the main ones. Chloe said quickly. You know the ones that go on Instagram. The ones that go in the magazine submission. You can be in the candid shots, obviously, like in the background, but for the staged portraits at the altar, you just don't fit the look. You are a little mature for the brand I am building. Mature. She meant old. She meant I had wrinkles. She meant I didn't look like a 20-year-old model. I looked at my son again. Liam, I said, my voice was trembling. I am your mother. I am paying for this photographer. I am paying for the flowers behind you. I am paying for the roof over your head right now, because I gave you the down payment for your house. And you are telling me I am not good enough to be in a photograph with you. Liam looked up. His face was red. He looked miserable, but he was weak. He had always been weak when it came to pretty girls who told him what to do. Mom, please, he said, don't make a scene. It is just a photo. Why do you have to make everything about you? It is Chloe's vision. Just let her have this. Make everything about me. I felt something snap inside my chest. It was a small sound, like a dry twig breaking in winter. I had spent my entire life making things about other people. I planned their parties. I celebrated their successes. I mourned their losses. I had emptied my savings account to give these 2 children a fairy tale start to their life. I had signed the contract for the venue. I had signed the contract for the caterer. I had signed the contract for the house they were currently living in rent-free. And I was being told to step out of the frame because I was too dark. Because I was too mature. I stood up. I walked over to the window and looked out at the night. I needed a moment. If I spoke now, I would scream, and screaming was not professional. Screaming was messy. And Beatrice, the event planner, was never messy. I took a deep breath. I let the cold air from the window cool the burning heat in my face. Okay, I said. I turned back to them. My face was calm, my voice was steady. It was the voice I used when a caterer told me they ran out of shrimp at a gala for 300 people. If that is what you want. Chloe clapped her hands. Oh, thank you, Beatrice, she squealed. She stood up and hugged me. It was a fake hug. She barely touched me. You are the best. I knew you would understand. It is just about the aesthetic. I know I said the aesthetic. We have to run. Chloe checked her phone. I have a lash appointment at 7. We will see you at the rehearsal dinner tomorrow. Of course, I said. I wouldn't miss it. Liam hugged me too. He held on a little longer. He smelled like guilt. Thanks, Mom, he whispered. You are a lifesaver. I watched them leave. I watched them get into the car I had helped them lease. I watched them drive away into the darkness. I walked back to the sofa. I picked up the wine glass Chloe had left. There was a smudge of pink lipstick on the rim. I carried it to the kitchen and poured it down the sink. They wanted me to be invisible. They wanted me to be a ghost who simply wrote checks and disappeared when the camera flashed. They thought I was a sweet old lady who would just roll over and take the insult because I loved my son. But they forgot who I was. I wasn't just a mother, I was a contract negotiator. I was a woman who read the fine print, and I remembered something. I remembered a specific clause in the vendor contracts for the wedding, and I remembered a specific clause in the deed transfer for their house. I walked into my home office. I opened the file cabinet. I pulled out a thick folder labeled Wedding. I sat down at my desk and turned on the lamp. I put on my reading glasses. You want an aesthetic, Chloe? I whispered to the empty room. I will give you an aesthetic. It is called breach of contract. You know, ladies, they say the devil is in the details, but I have always found that the devil is actually in the fine print. I sat at my mahogany desk with a cup of tea that had long since gone cold. Spread out in front of me was the paper trail of my generosity. It was a mountain of receipts and invoices and legal documents that represented the retirement I wasn't going to have because I wanted my son to be happy. I picked up the venue contract first. The Gilded Barn, a ridiculous name for a drafty building that charged $500 to rent a chair. I looked at the bottom of page 4. There was my signature, Beatrice Miller. Beside it was the line for guarantor. That was me too. I flipped to the section labeled Cancellation and Transfer. I adjusted my reading glasses. In my line of work, you learn that every contract has an escape hatch. You just have to know where to look for the handle. Clause 14b. Assignment of financial responsibility. I read it twice. The primary client, Beatrice Miller, reserves the right to assign financial liability for the balance of the event to the principal beneficiaries, the couple, provided said beneficiaries sign the assumption of debt addendum no later than 24 hours prior to the event commencement. I sat back in my chair. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. The balance. I had paid the deposits, of course, but the bulk of the money, the $40,000 for the catering, the $10,000 for the bar, the $15,000 for the venue rental fee, that was all due on the day of event. It was currently charged to my American Express Black Card, which was on file, but if I could get them to sign the assumption of debt addendum, the venue would legally be required to charge their card instead. I knew Chloe had a credit card on file with the wedding planner for incidentals, a card with a limit that definitely could not handle an $80,000 hit. I pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. I found the blank addendum form in the back of the packet. It looked innocent enough. It looked just like a standard vendor acknowledgement form, the kind you sign when you agree to the table layout or the flower arrangement. I set it aside. That was step 1. Then I reached for the second folder, the one labeled Oak Creek Property. This was the heavy artillery. See, Liam and Chloe thought they owned that house. They thought the papers they signed 3 months ago were closing documents, but they weren't. I had paid cash for the house, $87,000 down, and I carried the mortgage for the rest to get a better rate. What they had signed was a lease with option to purchase. I had intended to give them the deed of trust at the wedding reception. It was going to be my toast. Here is the house free and clear of my name. I was going to sign it over as the ultimate gift of love, a transfer of equity worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. But right now, legally speaking, I was the landlord, and they were tenants on a month-to-month lease. I looked at the tenant conduct clause. Landlord reserves the right to terminate tenancy with 30 days' notice for any behavior deemed detrimental to the property or the landlord's relationship with the neighbors, or simply at will. I looked at the photo of Liam on my desk. He was 5 years old in the picture, holding a fish he had caught. He looked so proud. He looked at me with such trust. Mom, look what I caught. Well, Liam, you caught a shark this time, and you let her bite your mother. I picked up my fountain pen, the one Robert gave me when I started my business. It had signed $1 million contracts. Tonight it was going to sign a declaration of war. I took the assumption of debt form. I clipped it to the final walkthrough sign-off sheet. I buried the scary legal language underneath a cover sheet that said, Vendor confirmation for reception timeline. If Chloe read it, she would see that she was accepting full financial liability for the wedding, but Chloe wouldn't read it. Chloe never read anything that didn't have a hashtag in front of it. She would see a line for a signature and she would sign it because she thought the world revolved around her. I placed the papers in a cream-colored envelope, the same cream color as her roses, the same cream color as her aesthetic. I looked at my watch. It was midnight. The rehearsal dinner was tomorrow night at 6. They wanted me to be invisible. Fine, I would be invisible. I would be so invisible that when the bill came due, they wouldn't even see me standing there. I turned off the desk lamp. The room plunged into darkness. Sleep well, aesthetic princess. I whispered, because tomorrow you are going to sign away your life, and you are going to think it is a gift. Friday morning arrived with the kind of gray sky that usually predicts a storm. I drank my coffee black. I didn't have the stomach for cream, not after hearing about ethereal cream themes for 3 months. I dressed in a sharp charcoal blazer and tailored slacks. It was my armor. If I was going to be invisible to my family, I was going to be hypervisible to the people who actually mattered. The vendors. I drove to the Gilded Barn. It was located 40 minutes outside the city, a place that used to be a working dairy farm, until someone realized rich brides would pay $10,000 to dance on reclaimed wood floors. I knew the owner, Marco. We had worked together on a tech launch in 2018. Marco was a shark in a cashmere sweater, and he respected 2 things: money and contracts. I walked in at 10 a.m. The staff was setting up for the rehearsal. Tables were being draped in that expensive champagne linen. Crystal glasses were being polished. It smelled like Frisia and money. Beatrice, Marco walked over, arms open. The mother of the groom, you look terrifyingly competent as always. Hello, Marco, I said, skipping the hug. We need to talk business, privately. Marco's smile didn't falter, but his eyes sharpened. He led me into his glass-walled office, overlooking the event floor. I sat down and placed the cream-colored folder on his desk. Is everything okay? Marco asked. The wire for the food and beverage minimum cleared yesterday. The minimum is cleared, I said, but the final balance for the overages, the open bar tab and the late-night raw bar, that is scheduled to be charged to my card tomorrow at midnight, correct? Standard procedure. Marco nodded. Card on file. I am changing the procedure, I said. I opened the folder. I pulled out the unsigned assumption of debt addendum. Tonight at the rehearsal dinner, I said, keeping my voice level, Chloe and Liam are going to sign this. It transfers all financial liability for the day of charges directly to the principal beneficiaries. Marco picked up the paper. He read it over. He looked up at me confused. Beatrice, these kids. I've met them. They don't look like they have $50,000 in liquid assets. If I charge their card and it declines, I'm the one holding the bag. They have assets. I lied smoothly. They have the house and they have a line of credit. I leaned forward. But more importantly, Marco, you know me. Have I ever let a vendor stiffed? Never. Exactly. If their card declines, my card is still the secondary guarantor. You will get paid. But I want the primary charge to hit them first. Hard. Marco studied my face. He saw the tightness in my jaw. He saw the lack of joy in my eyes. He realized this wasn't an administrative change. This was a lesson. Trouble in paradise? He asked softly. The aesthetic wasn't right, I said. I'm just adjusting the composition. Marco let out a short, dark laugh. He tapped the paper. Get them to sign it. Once I have their signature and their card info on this form, I'll switch the billing contact in the system. The charge goes through at 11 p.m. tomorrow night. Perfect, I said. And Marco, when the card declines, and it will decline, I want you to stop service immediately. Stop service. Marco raised an eyebrow during the reception. The minute the payment fails, I said cold as ice. Cut the bar, stop the band, turn on the house lights. That's brutal, Beatrice. That's a PR nightmare. No, I stood up. That is business. If the client can't pay, the party is over. Isn't that what you always told me? Marco looked at me with a mixture of fear and admiration. You really are the best in the business, B. I walked out of the office. Step 1 was done. The trap was armed. Now I just needed the mouse to take the cheese. I walked down to the main floor. Chloe and Liam were just walking in for their walkthrough. Chloe was wearing white yoga pants and a white crop top. She had a cameraman following her. Not the wedding photographer, a content creator she had hired to film behind-the-scenes reels for TikTok. And here is the venue. Chloe squealed at her phone spinning around. It's giving rustic luxury. It's giving main character energy. She didn't see me. I was standing in the shadows of the archway. The invisible mother. Hey, babe. Liam called out to her. Where do you want the gift table? In the back corner, Chloe said, waving her hand. Away from the dance floor. I don't want ugly wrapping paper messing up the background of the first dance. She stopped spinning and looked at the head table. She frowned. Why are there 6 chairs? She snapped at the poor assistant planner. I said sweetheart table only. No parents. Oh, the assistant stammered, I thought. Usually parents sit with the couple. No, Chloe said. Liam's mom is. She's sitting in the second tier with the aunts. We talked about this. She knows. I felt a sharp pain in my chest. Second tier, with the distant relatives. I wasn't just being cropped out of photos. I was being demoted to the cheap seats at a party I paid for. Liam walked over to her. Babe, are you sure? Mom might be hurt. She paid for the venue. Liam, Chloe groaned, rolling her eyes. The camera was still rolling. Stop bringing up the money. It's so tacky. It was a gift. Gifts don't come with strings attached. Besides, she'll be happier back there. She can talk about whatever old people talk about, knitting, the depression. She laughed. Liam laughed nervously. You're right, he said. She just wants us to be happy. I stepped out of the shadows. Hello. Children, I said. Chloe jumped about a foot in the air. She dropped her phone, which I admit, gave me a tiny spark of joy, but unfortunately she caught it before it hit the floor. She spun around and pasted that plastic smile on her face, the one that didn't reach her eyes, the one that said, oh look, it is the ATM with legs. Beatrice, she chirped, you startled us. We didn't know you were lurking in the shadows. It is very Phantom of the Opera. I walked into the light. I smoothed the front of my charcoal blazer. I wasn't lurking, dear, I said. I was meeting with Marco to finalize the payment schedule. You know, money doesn't actually grow on trees in the bridal suite. Liam stepped forward. He looked nervous. He was always nervous when his mother and his owner were in the same room. Did you hear us, Mom? He asked. About the seating. I did, I said. I looked at the empty chairs at the head table. The chairs where the parents usually sit. The chairs where Robert and I would have sat if he were still alive. And you are right, Chloe, I continued. My voice was soft, defeated. I would probably be much more comfortable in the back. With the aunts, we can talk. About. What was it? The depression, Chloe laughed. It was a nervous titter. Oh, I was just joking, Beatrice, you know, content. It is just a joke for the followers. Of course, I said, just a joke. I reached into my bag and touched the cream envelope, the trap. Speaking of finalizing things, I said, I have one last bit of administrative housekeeping for tonight. Since I am stepping back from the aesthetic duties, I want to hand over the final vendor confirmations to you too. Chloe's eyes lit up. You mean you are done meddling? I mean helping, I nodded. I am done. Tonight at the rehearsal dinner, I am going to give you a special wedding gift. It is an envelope containing the final sign-offs for the venue and the deed documents for the house. The house. That was the magic word. Chloe stopped looking at her reflection in the window and looked at me with genuine greed. The deed, she asked. You are bringing the deed tonight. I am, I said. It is time for you two to stand on your own 2 feet. to be the masters of your own domain. I want you to sign everything tonight so that when you wake up on your wedding day, you are officially homeowners." Liam looked relieved. He looked like a man who had just dodged a bullet. "Mom, that is amazing. Thank you. We really appreciate it. Do you?" I asked. "Yes," Chloe squealed. She ran over and gave me another one of those air hugs where her body didn't actually touch mine. "Oh, Beatrice, this is perfect. I can do a key reveal video for TikTok. It will go viral. #homeowner, #blessed." I smiled. "Yes, it will be quite a reveal." "I will see you tonight then," I said. 6 o'clock at the Italian place. "Yes," Chloe said, "and Beatrice, wear something neutral, okay? We don't want you clashing with the breadsticks," she giggled. Liam chuckled because he was too scared not to. I walked out of the barn. I walked to my car. I sat in the driver's seat and gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The Depression. She thought I was old enough to remember the Great Depression. I was 65. I ran 5 Burmese chots. I knew how to code HTML. I had more life in my little finger than she had in her entire curated feed. But she wanted me to be old. She wanted me to be a relic. Fine, I started the car. I would be a relic. I would be an ancient crumbling ruin, and I would bring the roof down on their heads. I drove home and went straight to my safe. I pulled out the second document, the one I hadn't shown Marco, the notice of lease termination. See, the house wasn't a gift, not on paper. I had set it up as a rent-to-own agreement, where the rent was $0, as long as they remained in good standing. But the contract had a clause, a behavioral clause. Robert had insisted on it years ago, when we first set up the trust for Liam. Robert always said, "Love is unconditional, but money comes with strings." The clause stated that the landlord, me, could revoke the option to purchase if the tenants engaged in actions detrimental to the family estate. I looked at the assumption of debt form for the wedding. I looked at the lease termination for the house. I put them both in the cream envelope. Tonight at dinner I would hand them this envelope. I would tell them it was the final vendor confirmations and the house deed. I would tell them to just sign at the bottom so we could celebrate. Chloe wouldn't read it. She would be too busy taking photos of her pasta. Liam wouldn't read it. He would be too busy trying to keep Chloe happy. They would sign their own execution orders between the appetizer and the entree. I went to my closet. I pushed aside the navy blue dress I had planned to wear, the one Chloe hated. I found an old beige suit. It was shapeless. It was the color of oatmeal. It made me look 10 years older. It was the perfect costume for the role I was about to play. The invisible mother, the wallet, the doormat, I put it on. I looked in the mirror. "You look harmless, Beatrice," I whispered to my reflection. And that is exactly why they will never see the knife coming. Now, ladies, I want you to picture the Last Supper. Except instead of apostles, you have 20 influencers taking pictures of their bruschetta. And instead of Judas, you have a mother in a beige suit who is about to betray everyone with a smile. The rehearsal dinner was held at Giovanni's. It was the kind of place that charged $30 for pasta because they sprinkled truffle oil on it. The room was loud, the lighting was dim, and I was sitting at table number 9 next to the kitchen door. I was not at the head table. I was not even at the table next to the head table. I was seated next to Great Aunt Myrtle, who was 92 years old and had forgotten her hearing aids. She kept shouting, "What is the soup?" at 5-minute intervals. I sat there in my oatmeal-colored suit. It scratched. It was shapeless. It made me look like a piece of dry toast. Chloe came over to say hello, only when the videographer started filming the room. She swept over in a white silk jumpsuit that probably cost more than my first car. "Oh, Beatrice," she squealed. She leaned down and whispered in my ear, "You really understood the assignment. That beige is perfectly neutral. You disappear right into the wallpaper." "Good job." "Thank you, Chloe," I said. "I aim to please." She patted my shoulder like I was a good dog and flitted away to take a selfie with the bread basket. Liam came over next. He had a glass of scotch in his hand. He looked already a little tipsy. "Hey, Mom," he said. He didn't look me in the eye. "Sorry about the seating. Chloe wanted the bridal party close to the front for the speeches. You know how it is." "I know how it is, Liam," I said. "You put your mother by the kitchen so I wouldn't ruin the aesthetic." He winced. "Don't be like that, Mom. Look, we got you the mushroom risotto. It is your favorite." I looked at the bowl of gray mush in front of me. It was cold. "It is delicious, Liam. Thank you." The dinner dragged on. There were speeches. The best man told a story about a college trip to Vegas that was entirely inappropriate. The maid of honor cried about how Chloe was her soul sister, and how they were going to be wives of the year. I sat there and fingered the cream envelope in my lap. It was heavy. It contained the future. At 8 o'clock the speeches wound down. The room was buzzing with wine and excitement. Chloe stood up and tapped her glass with a fork. "Okay, everyone," she shouted. Her voice was shrill. "We have one last little bit of business before we start the party. Beatrice, where are you?" She made a show of looking around the room like she couldn't find me. The spotlight swung around and hit me in the face. I blinked. "There she is," Chloe pointed, "our generous sponsor. Come on up, Beatrice." I stood up, my knees popped. I made sure to walk slowly. I made sure to look a little frail. I shuffled past the tables. I clutched the envelope to my chest like a shield. When I reached the head table, Chloe put her arm around me. She squeezed a little too hard. "Beatrice has a special surprise for us tonight," she announced to the room. I took the microphone. My hand was shaking, not from fear, from adrenaline. "Hello, everyone," I said. My voice was soft. I had to clear my throat. "I just want to say how happy I am to see Liam and Chloe starting their lives together." The room applauded politely. As a mother, I continued, "You spend your whole life preparing your children to leave the nest. You pay for their schools, you pay for their braces, you pay for everything." There was a chuckle from the crowd. Liam laughed the loudest. "But tonight," I said, "I am officially cutting the cord. I am passing the torch." I held up the envelope. "Inside this envelope are the final documents for the wedding, and the deed to the house on Oak Creek." The room gasped. Then they cheered, a loud raucous cheer. Chloe's eyes went wide. She grabbed Liam's hand. "I am giving this to you now," I said, turning to them, "because I want you to wake up on your wedding day as independent homeowners. I want you to own your future." I placed the envelope on the table. "But there is a catch," I said. The room went quiet. "You have to sign it now, tonight, in front of witnesses, because I am old-fashioned and I believe in sealing the deal before the champagne flows too freely." Chloe grabbed the envelope. She tore it open. She pulled out the stack of papers. The top page was the cover sheet I had made. Vendor confirmation and property title transfer. Behind it was the assumption of debt form for the venue. And behind that was the lease termination. Chloe didn't look at the text. She looked at the signature lines. There were little "sign here" sticky flags I had helpfully placed for her. "Do you have a pen, Beatrice?" she asked, breathless. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my fountain pen, the one that had signed 1,000 contracts. "Here, dear," I said. "Be careful, the ink is permanent. You know the old saying, sign in haste, repent at leisure." Well, Chloe and Liam were about to do a whole lot of repenting. They were signing their lives away at 40 miles an hour, while a room full of people cheered them on. Chloe grabbed the pen. She didn't even sit down. She leaned over the table, angling her body so the videographer could get her good side. "Where do I sign?" she asked, flipping the page without reading a single word. "Right there," I said, pointing to the line on the assumption of debt addendum. "This one confirms the final vendor counts for the reception." She scribbled her signature. It was a big looping autograph. "Chloe St. James." "And here," I pointed to the next line, "this authorizes the transfer of responsibility." Responsibility. Chloe laughed. "That sounds so adult." She signed it. The trap for the $80,000 wedding bill was set. Then came the house documents. I had layered them carefully. The top page was a beautiful, meaningless certificate I had printed on my home computer that said Property Transfer Commemoration. Underneath it was the legal document, a modification of lease terms. It wasn't a deed transfer. It was a document that converted their rent-to-own agreement into a month-to-month at-will tenancy, with an immediate clause for eviction upon financial insolvency. And this, I said, my voice trembling just enough to sell the performance. This is for the house. Just sign to acknowledge receipt of the title documents. Liam stepped forward. He hesitated for a second. He looked at the thick stack of papers. Should we maybe read through these later? He asked. It's a lot of legal stuff, Mom. My heart stopped for a beat. If he read it, the game was over. But Chloe saved me. She slapped his arm playfully. Liam, stop it. She hissed, smiling through her teeth. You're ruining the moment. Everyone is watching. It's your mother. She's giving us a house. Just sign the damn paper. Liam looked at Chloe. He looked at the camera. He looked at me. Sorry, Mom, he mumbled. Thanks. He took the pen. He signed his name next to hers. Click. The pen cap went back on. The sound was louder to me than the applause that erupted in the room. Done. Chloe shouted, holding up the champagne glass she had grabbed with her free hand. We're homeowners, baby. She leaned over and kissed Liam. The flashbulbs went off. It was the perfect picture of triumph. I took the envelope back. I'll just keep these safe for you until after the honeymoon, I said. You don't want to lose them at the party. Yeah, whatever, Chloe said, already turning away to hug her maid of honor. Thanks, Beatrice. You can go sit down now. You can go sit down now, dismissed like the hired help. I walked back to table number 9. I sat down next to Great Aunt Myrtle. Did they kiss? Myrtle shouted. Yes, Myrtle, I said, tucking the envelope into my purse. They kissed goodbye to their credit score. I didn't stay for dessert. I waited until the tiramisu was served, and then I slipped out the side door. I walked to my car in the cool night air. The silence was beautiful. I sat in the driver's seat and turned on the overhead light. I pulled out the papers. There they were, 2 signatures in permanent ink. I took out my phone. I snapped a picture of the assumption of debt form. I opened my email app and attached the photo. I typed in Marco's email address. Subject: Executed addendum for Miller St. James wedding. Message: Marco, here is the signed transfer of liability we discussed. Please update the billing contact immediately. As per our conversation, the card on file for Beatrice Miller is no longer authorized for any charges past midnight tonight. Proceed with charging the primary client's card on file. If it declines, initiate standard non-payment protocols. I hit send. Then I opened my banking app. I transferred the $87,000 from my savings account, the money I had been saving to pay off the rest of the house mortgage, into a secured trust that Liam couldn't touch. I drove home feeling lighter than I had in years. Tomorrow was the wedding. The ceremony was at 4. The reception started at 6. The credit card charge was scheduled for 7 p.m., right after the appetizers. I laid out my oatmeal-colored suit on the bed. I would wear it again tomorrow. I would be the beige invisible mother, right up until the moment the lights went out. Chloe wanted a memorable wedding. She was about to get one. People were going to be talking about this event for years, just not for the reasons she thought. Honey, let me tell you something about perfection. It is expensive. It is fragile, and usually, it is built on a foundation of debt. The wedding day was perfect. Sickeningly perfect. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and the gilded barn looked like a page out of a magazine. There were thousands of cream roses. There were crystal chandeliers hanging from the rafters. There was even a string quartet playing Taylor Swift songs as the guests arrived. I arrived early wearing my oatmeal suit. I looked like a smudge of beige paint on a white canvas. I took my seat, not in the front row. Oh no. Chloe had insisted that the front row was for the bridal party and VIPs. I was seated in the third row behind a large pillar. I couldn't see the altar, but I could see the back of the videographer's head perfectly. I listened to the vows. I listened to Liam promise to love and cherish. I listened to Chloe promise to honor and respect. I almost laughed out loud. Respect. The girl didn't know the meaning of the word. She thought respect was something you got when you reached 10,000 followers. The ceremony ended and the guests filtered into the main hall for the reception. It was lavish. There was a champagne tower, an oyster bar, and waiters passing around hors d'oeuvres. That cost $6 a bite. I found my table, table 19. It was in the back corner next to the swinging doors of the kitchen. Every time a waiter walked out, I got a face full of steam and the smell of dish soap. I sat there and checked my watch. It was 6:30. According to the schedule, the first dance was at 6:45. Dinner service began at 7, and at 7 o'clock sharp, the automated billing system at the Gilded Barn would attempt to charge the credit card on file for the remaining balance, $42,000. I watched Chloe and Liam enter the room. They looked like royalty. Chloe was glowing, working the room, twirling her dress, laughing her head off. She looked at me once from across the room. She gave me a little wave, a dismissive little flutter of her fingers. Thanks for the party, Beatrice. Now stay in your corner. The first dance began. It was beautiful. They swayed, they dipped, and the dry ice machine pumped fog onto the floor. I poured myself a glass of water. I didn't drink the champagne. I wanted a clear head. At 6:55, Marco walked into the room. He wasn't wearing his usual welcoming smile. He was wearing a headset and holding a tablet. He looked stressed. He looked at his tablet, then he looked at the head table. I knew what had happened. The pre-authorization check had failed. Chloe's credit card, the one she used for incidentals, probably had a limit of $5,000, maybe 10 if her daddy was generous. It definitely did not have 42,000. Marco tapped his headset. He signaled to the bar manager. I saw the bartender stop pouring. A guest asked for a refill and the bartender shook his head and put a cork in the bottle. It was starting. I checked my watch, 7 o'clock. Marco walked onto the dance floor. The song had just ended, and the DJ was winding up to introduce the toasts. Marco walked right up to the sweetheart table. He didn't wait for a pause. He didn't wait for permission. He leaned over and whispered something to Liam. I saw Liam's face go pale. He looked at Chloe. Chloe looked annoyed. She shooed Marco away with her hand like he was a fly. Marco didn't move. He leaned in closer. He said something else. Chloe stopped smiling. She looked offended. She pointed at me. I saw her mouth the words. Go ask her. Marco shook his head. He held up a piece of paper. I recognized it even from across the room. It was the cream-colored addendum, the one with her signature on it. Chloe stood up. She looked furious. She stomped her foot. It was a toddler tantrum in a $10,000 dress. The music stopped abruptly. The DJ had received the signal. The room went quiet. The murmur of conversation died down. 200 guests turned to look at the bride, who was now screaming at the venue owner. This is ridiculous, Chloe yelled. Her voice echoed in the silent barn. Just run the card again. I did run it, Mrs. St. James, Marco said. His voice was loud enough to carry. It declined twice, then asked Beatrice. Chloe shrieked. She pointed a manicured finger at table 19. She's paying for this. She's the guarantor. Marco looked at me. The whole room looked at me. I stood up. I smoothed my oatmeal suit. I picked up my purse. I walked slowly across the dance floor. My heels clicked on the reclaimed wood. Click, click, click. I walked until I was standing right in front of the head table. Chloe looked down at me from her raised platform. She looked triumphant. Fix this, Beatrice, she hissed. Give him your card, he's ruining the vibe. I looked at Marco. Is there a problem, Marco? I asked. The payment for the balance declined, Beatrice, Marco said. And per the contract addendum signed yesterday, The liability lies with the principal beneficiaries. I cannot serve dinner until the balance is cleared. Chloe laughed. It was a nervous sound. Beatrice, just pay the man. Stop being dramatic. I looked at Chloe. I looked at Liam. I'm sorry, I said. My voice was calm, clear, and deadly. But I'm just a guest here. What? Chloe whispered. I'm just a guest, I repeated. I stepped out of the financial picture yesterday. Remember, you signed the transfer. You wanted to own your future. You wanted to be independent homeowners. I opened my purse. I pulled out my copy of the contract. You signed the assumption of debt, Chloe. You assumed full liability for this event. But that was just paperwork, Chloe sputtered. You said it was just a formality. It was a contract, dear, I said, and contracts are binding. Liam stood up. Mom, please, he begged. We don't have $40,000. You know we don't. Please just pay it. We'll pay you back. Pay me back, I asked. With what, Liam? With the money you spend on leases and lattes? With the money you don't earn because you're building a brand? I turned to the room. I looked at the guests. I looked at Chloe's parents, who were sitting at table 1 drinking the expensive wine I had paid for. I have spent $80,000 on this wedding so far, I said. I paid for the flowers, I paid for the dress, I paid for the rentals. I looked back at Chloe. But yesterday you told me I wasn't good enough to be in the photos. You told me I ruined the aesthetic. You told me to sit in the back with the aunts. The room gasped. I heard Great Aunt Myrtle shout, she did what? So I continued, if I'm not good enough to be in the picture, I'm certainly not good enough to pay for it. I turned to Marco. Marco, I said, as a guest, I believe the party is over. Marco nodded. He spoke into his headset. Lights, he said. And then the most beautiful thing happened. The soft romantic mood lighting cut out. The harsh overhead fluorescent work lights slammed on. The ethereal cream dream vanished. Under the glare of the industrial lights, the barn looked like what it was. A barn. The makeup looked heavy. The flowers looked wilting. The magic evaporated instantly. Chloe screamed. It was a long, high-pitched sound of pure horror. My aesthetic, she wailed. Turn them off, turn them off. I'm afraid we're closing down. Marco announced to the room. Please vacate the premises immediately. There will be no dinner service. I looked at Chloe one last time. She was standing under the buzzing fluorescent lights, looking small, tacky, and cheap. I think you got your wish, dear, I said. I'm finally invisible. And with that I turned around and walked out. I didn't look back. I walked past the stunned guests. I walked past the waiters who were already clearing the plates. I walked out into the cool night air and got into my car. I had one more stop to make, because the wedding wasn't the only thing they lost tonight. I was halfway to my sedan when I heard the heavy thud of running footsteps on the gravel. I didn't have to turn around to know who it was. It was Richard, Chloe's father. A man who liked to talk about his yacht, but somehow always forgot his wallet when the check came at dinner. Beatrice, he shouted. He sounded out of breath. He grabbed my arm just as I reached for the door handle. I spun around. Richard was red in the face. His bow tie was crooked. What the hell was that? He demanded. You humiliated my daughter. You humiliated our family. There are 200 people in there wondering why the lights are on and the bar is closed. I pulled my arm away from his grip and dusted off the sleeve of my oatmeal suit. I didn't humiliate anyone, Richard. I said, calm as a cucumber. Your daughter signed a contract. She assumed financial responsibility. If she couldn't pay the bill, that's hardly my fault. She's 25, Richard yelled. She doesn't have $40,000 sitting in a checking account. You knew that. This was a setup, it was a lesson, I corrected him. And speaking of money, Richard, you're a wealthy man. Or at least you tell everyone you are. If you're so concerned about the family reputation, why didn't you pull out your credit card when the lights went out? You could have saved the party. Richard opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked like a fish on a dock. My assets are tied up, he stammered, in trust. You know how it is, I smiled. Ah, yes, tied up. Well, my assets are untied, Richard, and they're walking away. Now, ladies, I have learned that there is nothing quite as dramatic as a bride in a grass-stained wedding dress, screaming at a police officer on a front lawn at midnight. It's a sight that really puts things into perspective. Chloe and Liam had called the police. Of course they did. They thought the police were customer service agents, with guns who were there to fix their bad day. I sat in the living room and watched the red and blue lights flash against the wall. I waited until I heard the heavy knock. Police, open up. I stood up. I checked my hair in the hallway mirror. Still perfect. I walked to the door and unlocked the deadbolt. Officer Miller stood there. He looked young. He looked tired. Behind him, Chloe was sobbing into Liam's shoulder. Liam looked like he was about to throw up. "Ma'am," the officer said, touching the brim of his hat, "these folks claim you've barricaded yourself inside their home. They say you changed the locks illegally." "They're mistaken, officer," I said, stepping out onto the porch. "This is my home. I am the sole owner on the deed. These two are former tenants." "Liar," Chloe shrieked. She lunged at me, but Liam held her back. "You gave us the house. We signed the papers last night. It was a gift." I looked at Chloe with pity. "No, dear. You signed a receipt, and you signed a voluntary termination of your lease." I handed the officer the folder. "Here is the deed recorded in my name. Here is the lease agreement. And here is the document they signed yesterday evening, witnessed by 200 people, terminating their residency effective immediately." The officer turned on his flashlight. He read the papers. He frowned. He flipped a page. He read the signature line. "Is this your signature, ma'am?" he asked, showing the paper to Chloe. Chloe squinted at it. "Yes, but she said it was the deed. She tricked us." "It says notice of lease termination right at the top in bold letters," the officer said. He handed the papers back to me. "Ma'am, ignorance of what you're signing isn't a defense, but trespassing is." He turned to the shivering couple. "This looks legal to me. The owner wants you off the property. But all our stuff is inside." Liam cried, "Our clothes, the wedding gifts." "You can make an appointment to collect your belongings at a later date," I said coolly. "I will have movers pack it up. I believe Budget Box Moving has very reasonable rates." "You can't do this, Mom," Liam whispered. "Where are we supposed to go? It's our wedding night." I looked at my son. "You have a reservation at the Hampton Inn, don't you? Or did you cancel that too because it didn't fit the aesthetic?" The officer turned to them. "Folks, you need to leave now or I will have to cite you for disturbing the peace." Chloe let out a wail that sounded like a dying cat. She looked at the house. She looked at her white Audi blocked in the driveway. She looked at me. "I hate you," she hissed. "I will never forgive you for this." "That's fine, Chloe," I said. "I don't need your forgiveness. I need my house back." I watched as they trudged down the driveway. They got into Liam's car. They backed out, screeching the tires. The officer tipped his hat to me. "Have a good night, ma'am. Sorry for the trouble." "No trouble, officer," I said, "just taking out the trash." I went back inside and locked the door. I poured myself a glass of wine. I sat in the dark and listened to the silence. It was the most beautiful sound in the world. But the story doesn't end there. You see, revenge is a dish best served cold. But justice is a dish that keeps on giving. 6 months later, I was sitting in a cafe in Paris, eating a croissant that actually tasted like butter and not like sadness. My phone buzzed. It was an email from Marco at the Gilded Barn. Subject: Update on collections. Message: Hi, Beatrice. Just thought you'd like to know. The court ruled in our favor. The judgment against Chloe St. James for the unpaid balance of $42,000 plus legal fees has been finalized. They're garnishing her wages, or they would be if she had a job. I believe they're seizing her car next week. I smiled and took a sip of my café au lait. Things had changed quite a bit since that night on the lawn. The house on Oak Creek was gone. I sold it 3 weeks after the wedding. I sold it to a lovely family with 3 muddy dogs and loud children who actually played in the yard. I made a tidy profit of $200,000. I used it to fund my ethereal retirement tour. As for the happy couple, well, it turns out that love doesn't conquer all, especially when all includes a massive lawsuit and homelessness. Liam and Chloe moved into Richard's basement. The yacht captain apparently didn't have room for them on his boat. I heard through the grapevine that the Vogue aesthetic is hard to maintain when you're sleeping on a pull-out couch next to your father-in-law's collection of dusty taxidermy. They tried to sue me, of course. They found a lawyer who worked out of a strip mall who told them they had a case for fraudulent inducement. My lawyer ate him for breakfast. He pointed out that they had signed a document titled Assumption of Debt in front of 200 witnesses while being filmed. The judge actually laughed. He dismissed the case with prejudice and ordered them to pay my legal fees. Liam called me once, about 2 months ago. Mom, he said. He sounded tired. Can we just talk? I miss you. I miss the son I raised, I told him gently. But the man who let his wife treat his mother like a prop, I don't know him and I don't finance strangers. I hung up. It hurt. Of course it hurt. I am a mother. But a surgeon has to cut to cure, and I had removed the cancer from my life. I finished my croissant and wiped the crumbs from my lip. I opened my Instagram app. I didn't post much, but today I felt inspired. I uploaded a photo of myself, just me, sitting in a cafe in Paris wearing a bright red scarf. No filters, no ring lights, just a 65-year-old woman living her best life. I tagged Chloe, caption, "The aesthetic is freedom." Hashtags. No filter, paid in full. I saw the notification pop up instantly. Chloe St. James viewed your story. I blocked her. I paid the check and walked out onto the cobblestone street. The sun was shining. The air was crisp. I had a museum to visit and a dinner reservation for one at a place that didn't serve foam. They wanted me to disappear. They wanted a ghost. Well, they got one. But they forgot that ghosts are free. And honey, freedom is the most beautiful look of all. Thanks for listening, ladies. And remember, if someone tells you that you don't fit the picture, maybe it's time to burn the frame and buy your own gallery.